Welcome along to Tweet Street Scotland Occupied, home of the satirical soul tire. I'm Cinnamon Bridges, aka Peter. On Women's History Month and a fitting celebration of International Women's Day, celebrating the likes of Cleopatra, Anne Frank, Malala Yousafzai, Sojourner Truth, whose famous speech at a Ohio Women's Rights Convention in 1851 that has come to be known as Ain't I a Woman, Edith Cowan, Rosa Parks, who on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955 refused to give up her seat to a white man, and in doing so sparked the civil rights movement across America. J.K. Rowling, Joanna Cherry, though it is the great Catherine I will say more of. Maybe you're thinking of the Prussian-born queen. I refer to Catherine Barclay nee Leibode, born on the 29th of April 1952 in number 3 Carrick Street, Anderson, Glasgow. She was born into poverty as the sixth child of 9, now mother of 4 and grandmother to 7. Her favourite women as she grew were her mother and Granny Leibode. She would defy the devil to protect her family, a saying I was used to hearing as a child. I guess that's where I get it from. Thank you, Catherine, or as I like to call you, Mammy. Today, I'm delighted to host the Alba Human Females, all candidates running towards the council chamber. Eileen Spencer, Farah Hameed, Jackie Anderson, Laura White, Leanne Terver, Marjorie Smith and Wendy McDonald will not be wasting. Quite the opposite, they'll be sharing their validity for all to hear. We also have guest speakers, Denise Finlay. Okay, so it's now over to candidate questions. The first question is, please tell us who you are, the name of the ward you're standing for, tell us why you joined Alba, why you chose to stand as an Alba candidate, tell us a little bit about your life experiences and how you think they will help you to understand and better support the individuals and families in your ward. So first of all, I'd like to Eileen Spence to answer. Go.
Right, hi everybody, my name's Eileen Spence. I'm a retired teacher, but for years and years and years, at least back into the 1980s, I've been involved in community things. That was in Glasgow. I set up things like play schemes, but the main thing I was involved in Glasgow was terrible housing in a particular part of Glasgow called Royston Hill, where they had these blocks called large panel system builds. And the conditions that people were living in were completely horrendous. And instead of the council addressing what was wrong with housing, they blamed it on the tenants. And they were saying things like only 50% of mothers were having their children vaccinated and they were negligent mothers. And that wasn't the case at all. It was a case of that the flats were so damp with water penetration and fungal growths that their children, it was taking 15 months to actually get them vaccinated because they just had constant colds, coughs, chest infections and things like that. Ran a successful campaign, and what it meant was the blocks were actually at the same risk as what happened at Grenfell. And we persuaded Glasgow City Council that what they had to do was demolish these blocks, and they did. They demolished 13 of them. And they were all like 144 units in each housing block, and people had to be rehoused. I was also on the North Area Management Committee for Glasgow District Council. I served on the Maternity Services Liaison Committee for Greater Glasgow Health Board. That was a bit funny because I went along to my first meeting and I was sitting there and everybody's going like that, you know, but what do you do? Because I was sitting amongst doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, all that kind of thing, right? And I kind of went like that, well, actually I'm a user. Right, I've got 7 children and I'm expecting my 8th. So I'm using your service. So I think it's right that I have a say in it. I was also involved in community health projects in the city. And after all of that, I did it the wrong way round kind of thing. I had all my children and then I went to university. And I've got a degree in geography and town and country planning. And then I went on to do a postgrad in teaching, but also I have taught the Poison Chalice, which is sex education, for the best part of 20 years. So I know what is appropriate and what is age and stage appropriate. when it comes to sex and relationships education in schools and what is not. And what is being proposed by the Scottish Parliament and by groups like TIE is highly inappropriate for what's happening in schools. And I joined Alba because Alba were the party that were saying, well, actually, we are against this. We are against, what's happening with GRA, not that they were against gender recognition per se, right? But in the way that it was put forward to us, right? Especially with self-ID. I've been particularly worried about the impact that is going to have on schools and school children, right? If this goes forward. And also all the things that have been mentioned before, in Eva's statement that was read out, how it's going to impact what happens in hospitals, what happens in women's services, what happens in, for example, rape crisis, what happens everywhere. It's the impact that is going to have on women who are 52% of the population. And I maybe think that people forget that we gave birth to the other 48%. And yet we are told that our fears are not valid. Everything that we have tried politely and sometimes stridently to put forward to the Scottish Parliament, to our MSPs, is being dismissed. Something that really, really affected me was that Shirley-Ann Somerville, who is one of the MSPs, there were 200 meetings were attended by lobbyist groups, right? And not one meeting was attended by any of the women's groups or any of the groups who represented parents and children, right? None of our opinions were taken into consideration. In fact, we were ignored. And now we've got to a stage where the Scottish Parliament has, this was my greatest fear, that they were actually going to put this forward before the council elections, right, and try and get it forced through. And as a wife, a mother, a grandmother, right, with children who are attending school right now, I think it's imperative that we have to put a pause on this. And as a councillor, if I get selected, that is something that I would most definitely be working on with the local education authority to say, we have to get evidence about this. We have to put the evidence to the local education authorities and say to them, did you know about this? Are you aware of this? And if you weren't, then I would be asking you to think about it again as to what you're going to be putting into schools.
Excellent, Eileen. What ward are you running
in? Hopefully it's going to be Girvan and South Carrick, right? I've been approved as a candidate for that area. And I tell you, I'm going to have a job on my hands down here because apparently it's Tory Labour, SNP, Tory Labour, right? So I'm really going to have a hard job down here, persuading people, to come across to Alba, because as far as I'm concerned, it's the women-friendly party. Alba is the women-friendly party, and they're for women and they're for children. So that's what I would be doing as an Alba candidate.
Thanks, Eileen. Over to Farah Hameed to answer the same question.
Well, I'll be running, my name's Farah Hameed. I'll be running for councillor in Springboro, Rob Royston area, which is very close to my heart. I taught biology in that area, St Roch's and Springboro. I love teaching teenagers. So I know all about the curriculum for excellence. I was also an immigration officer for my sins. I worked for the Home Office. So I'm very much in touch with the different communities which are housed in that area. I can say all the issues around that area are close to my heart. I was so teacher. I've worked in various different sectors, hospitality as well, while I was studying law. So housing, that's another thing. I was out and about visiting. So I think I've been around the block. I've accessed food banks myself while I was working. I've taken handouts. So I don't come from what they call, if somebody was to look at me, would say, well, she comes from a well-off family, you know, or she has, as my Glasgow punters would say, a corner shop.
Right.
You know, so I can come away with all the jokes. So I can take it all. So why did I join the Alba party? I'm all for independence. I don't think we can get anywhere without independence, Peter.
Right.
To make Glasgow and Scotland better. Education's at the forefront for me. Poverty, that's another thing. Wherever you go in Glasgow, there's areas of poverty and deprivation. Women's rights, that also very, very close to my heart. Children's rights. What went through our Scottish Parliament, if you want to call it for the best, the GRA reform, absolutely shocking, taking away women's and children's rights, as was said in Eva's statement. We try and encourage girls to go into STEM. When I was a biology teacher, trying to educate young girls to go into the sciences, engineering. How are we going to encourage the youth and young girls to go forward in education? You know, our children to go forward in education, young girls, when we've got our rights being taken off us. So, and local issues, you know, the community centres. I've been walking around Springboro and Rob Royston talking to the locals. Banks, shops are being closed, banks are being closed, rat infestation. Elderly people can't get out and about because the banks are closed, the transport issues. They don't have community centres to go out and about in to sit with. Parks as well, as Wendy said, you know, in our previous tweet street, parks are run down. You know, the elderly and the young can't sit together because the parks have been run down. Services, support services, drug and rehabilitation services are totally run down or closed. Within Springboro and Rob Royston area, wherever you go, there's little mementos left for somebody who's passed away. When I was going on my wee walkabout, wherever you go, there's beside a tree, somebody's passed away, somebody's child, somebody's father, brother. So, I mean, that in itself is heartbreaking.
Thank you, Farah.
So that's why I want to become a councillor.
Thank you so much. Now we move on to Jackie.
Thanks, Peter. I'm Jackie Anderson, and I'm standing in the Howe, Fife and Tay Coast ward in northeast Fife, north side of Fife. I have a lot of history in the area. I went to school in St Andrews, which isn't in the ward, but it's certainly nearby the ward. I was schooled there before I went off to Edinburgh to university. I also worked in the ward. I have previous history working in community development in the ward, and a lot of the issues, sadly, are still the same now as they were when I worked up there many years ago. So I'm a mum of two. I'm on my own with my two boys, but they've got a very supportive dad. But yeah, I don't live in poverty. I work, but I do know, you know, some of the issues that are faced by other mums who also work, who do live in poverty because of low wages and dependency on top-up benefits and stuff like that. And to be honest, I joined Alba in the beginning because I was fed up waiting for independence. And I saw the SNP mitigating, you know, child payments and all this stuff. And I thought, you know, we're not going to get anywhere if we keep mitigating. And so it kind of took me back to, you know, the whole reason why I joined Alba was to get a move on with independence. That was my main priority. But since then, with all the talk of GRE and all of the rest of it, I'll be staying in Alba because of the other policies, not just independence, which is my first priority, but I really believe that in order to solve all the other problems long term, we need independence.
Excellent. Thank you, Jackie. We now move on to our next speaker, who will be Laura White, please. On you go, Laura.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura White and I'm standing in the Strathmartin ward in Dundee. The reason I actually joined Alba was because of the total inaction on independence that the Scottish Government was, well, doing nothing about really. And then obviously the GRE situation came along. And of course, before that, we had Boris, we had Brexit. So, I mean, it's just an amalgamation of disaster after disaster that the SNP and the Scottish Government just seem to not want to push forward on independence to try and resolve some of these issues. So that I joined the Alba Party, and I'm wholeheartedly stand with the fact that they support biological reality and they support women and girls' rights to dignity and to safe spaces, which in the current political climate is, well, they basically stand alone almost nearly. There are other parties that believe in it also, but I think we're being badly let down by the current political powers that be in Scotland. I've lived in the ward that I'm standing in my entire life. I've worked in it. I've got a background in dentistry. Obviously, the area of the ward that I live in is in the top 5% for poverty. So I perfectly understand exactly what everybody in this, well, these areas go through because I've lived here all the days. So I see it every time I walk out my front door. I see the drug issues. I see the lack of facilities in the area and basically the neglect that the council has left the area just to basically rot away in. So I think you have to sometimes put your money where your mouth is and just go, okay, if nobody else is going to do anything about it, I'm going to put myself out there, which is not my normal comfort zone by any stretch of any imagination, because politics is quite a toxic environment, especially for women. But I decided that, no, I'm going to have to do something about it. So that's why I applied to become a candidate for Alba.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. Next person to answer is Leanne Terver. So,
my name is Leanne Terver and I'm standing as the Alba candidate for Dunfermline Central. This is where I was born and brought up, and it's also where I raised my own children. I was born in the 70s and I grew up during the miners' strike, seeing poverty all around me. Some people don't tend to think, they think poverty, they hear the word poverty and they think it's going without the basics, going without the essentials. If you've not lived amongst it, then you don't realise what all it contains. I mean, it's mental ill health, it's physical ill health, it's stress, anxiety, depression, suicide, substance abuse, alcohol abuse. It's just complete social deprivation. And why are these people kept there? Why are they kept down? Why is there no options? I mean, these people are going to be costing the economy. Bring them up, give them help. I joined Alba for many issues, poverty being a big one, independence being a big one, and GRE reform being a big one. But there's many other issues. There's a lot in Scotland that's needing fixed. And I got sick of it. That's why I'm standing as an Alba candidate. I've got no background in politics. I've done engineering at one point. I'm currently on benefits. I'm caring for my mum, so I'm a carer. I've been a single parent on benefits at one point. So I've been across the board. I've been benefits, carers, through the welfare system, working, buying houses, all that jazz. Alba's the only party that's got independence as a priority. Main reason for joining. I was feeling politically homeless. I didn't have anywhere to go, and Alba pushing for immediate independence, because without independence we cannot fix everything. We can maybe put sticking plasters here and there. That's not doing anything. There's so much more that could be done in Scotland, and it's not being done. Waiting any longer is not an option. People are suffering. You've got energy price rises, you've got fuel price rises, food rises, you've got everything's going up. How are these people going to cope? How are these people that don't have anything? I've got my friends messaging me, they knew I was standing, and this is what they're worried about. This is their main thing that they're worried about, is how they're going to cope, how they're going to pay their food bills, how they're going to manage. It's completely affordable, and that's not just for the poor. That's for people that have got money as well. That it's impossible for them. 1 in 4 children in poverty. Why is that the case? I seen poverty 40 years ago when I grew up in during a miners' strike. Why is that not changed? It's absolutely shocking that hasn't changed in 40 years. Inflation's expected to hit 7%. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Some of the things Alba are calling for make sense. They will alleviate some of the hardships that people are going to face. The 5-point poverty plan, which I'm sure we'll speak about later, so I won't go into that just now, will help. It'll help those that are suffering. I wish there was a 50% deduction in energy bills. I'm going to struggle. I'm on carers and universal credit at the minute, and I've got a house of 3 women, so I'm going to struggle with this. It's to fix poverty though. Alba's doing some good. They're trying. They're going to alleviate some of it, but to fix it properly, we can't do anything without our independence. Secondly, the GRA bill that was published through the week. I was up standing outside primary schools on that day, handing out information to the women and the grannies and the dads and that outside the primary school on what it means for them. And Shona Robinson's comment just absolutely floored me, that predators don't pretend to be anything else. I mean, you've got Jimmy Savile pretending to be a charitable man. You've got priests pretending to be religious people. You've got, they always pretend. They pretend to be caring partners so that they can get into some single mother with kids, because they get hit quite a lot as well. So yeah, predators, they don't put a beacon or something on their head saying that I'm a predator. Of course they pretend to be something else. It's absolutely infuriating. And it's a kick in the teeth to any woman who has suffered from abuse, because fine well they know that male was pretending to be somebody else when that person was getting abused. Alba's the only party, well, they're not the only party, but they're doing their best. They believe a woman is an adult human female. This no debate absolutely riles me. Women are losing their jobs for speaking up. They're not gaining promotion for speaking up. They're not getting university places for speaking up. And silencing people for being concerned for the rights of themselves and their daughters, granddaughters, sisters, mothers. You know, it doesn't bear thinking about. We're just being shot down. It's just for stating biological science, biological fact. Stickering, you know, violent stickering, that they're getting arrested for putting some stickers up saying adult human female. What's that all about? And what's the police thinking about getting involved in all of this stuff, you know? Actually going out and doing this. Alba believes that women should be able to discuss all policies that affect them, and this affects women and it affects children, and it can go in the bin as far as I'm concerned. The independence, that was my main reason for going. As I say, Scotland is broken. There's so much broken in Scotland that it's unfixable without getting our independence. And why has this not been done? How many mandates do we need? My wee auntie, there was an SNP canvasser at her door the other day, and she said, "How many mandates do you folk need?" You know, she sees it. As I said before, I was a single parent with 2 kids. I've not got any experience in politics, but I've got experience. I've brought up 2 kids on income support. I managed a budget on income support. A carer for my mum, and I have been. I was a carer while I was working, and now I was made redundant due to COVID. So now I'm full-time. We had to shield, so I'm a full-time carer at the minute. And I think more normal people's need to get into councils and into places. We need to step it up. The schools and that as well. I heard some of the literature that was going into the schools, and I'm absolutely gobsmacked at it. It's just ridiculous. We need people into politics that actually care, people that can advocate for people, people that can stand up for people from all walks of life with different views. You know, it doesn't matter where you've came from. What matters is what you want to fight for and how you want to help people and how you want to advocate. But independence first, and then everything else can get fixed.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leanne. Right, it's over to Marjorie next to answer the same question.
I'm Marjorie Smith. I'm standing for the Ward 18 Nairn Codder for Highland Council. I joined Alba because, well, I was actually absolutely delighted when Alba started up, because I was in the SNP and I was actually really desperate to leave the SNP, but people were saying, oh, stay and fight from within and try and change it from within. But they had started this, they're bringing forward this transphobia definition in the NEC that we were all supposed to be adhering to, and there was all the chat about that. And at that point, I think that was about a week before Alba started, and at that point I felt like I was under attack. It was just so oppressive and really horrific, and you know, but the Scott politics was so, I just felt disenfranchised, quite frankly, because you know, at least ISP had started, so I knew that they were going to be for women's rights, but they were, you know, they were very small, you know, inception of a party. So when Alba started, and it was obviously going to be a lot bigger, I was just absolutely thrilled. To be quite honest, I was actually dancing around the house. I was so happy about it. So I decided to join, but I had bought a ticket for Joan McAlpine's adoption night, which was the day, I think it was about the day after Alba started. So I thought I'll go to that and then I'll go in and I'll resign on the day on the Sunday. So I went on to go to my SNP to resign, only to discover I had been locked out of my SNP. And it turns out quite a few women had as well, because we'd signed up for going to an Alba women's conference, which was open to anybody from any party and none. And the SNP had got hold of the names, and I assume that's, I mean, it might not be, there may be, I never had any explanation or anything. I tried to find out why I'd been locked out summarily without any explanation, but I never found out. But yeah, I was really going to go on to resign anyway, so it was kind of convenient. But anyway, I've lived in Nairn for about 26 years. I moved up here to move in with my partner, who I unfortunately lost in 2017. I've actually been sort of campaigning my whole life. I started a lesbian group in Inverness when I was 18 in 1981, through putting adverts in Spare Rib and Sequel and a couple of other things. I sort of kept going with that for on and off for quite a number of years. I went to live in Edinburgh for a while, and then when I came to live here, I started doing office work, and I've been a legal secretary and a local medical secretary and different things like that. So, but I look forward to getting to the nitty-gritty of how, you know, what we can actually do to make a difference to things up here. And I know that parents in Inverness in the area are not happy with what the Highland Council seem to be doing as a matter of course. Whenever they do any refurbishment in schools, they seem to go to the default position of making the toilets unisex in primary schools and secondary schools. But I mean, they're building a new primary school, and they were going to, yeah, you know, what happens is that there's a story in the Inverness Courier, everybody goes crazy, that the parents start complaining, and then there's another story a day or so later, so oh no, we're not doing that at all, we're backtracking. But the parents know they're going to have to keep a watch very closely on what they actually do, because quite frankly, they can't be trusted, apparently, to just make primary school children's toilets basic human decency level, common sense level toilets. I mean, it's just incredible what's going on. But when Alba started and I saw that one of the first things they said was that they were going to be for women's sex-based rights, that was just like hallelujah, you know, at last. Because really, I mean, it's just shocking. I find it inexplicable how every single political party seems to have been brainwashed and they're all spouting this nonsensical rubbish. You know, it's just incredible. I mean, Joe Swinson trying to say what a woman is without saying what a woman is. They just look so stupid, and, you know, parroting trans women are women. Oh no, it's wrong to say only women have a cervix, and it's complete madness. So I'm just really hoping that sanity will prevail. I mean, it's got to. I mean, to me, it is. It's like a sort of cult thing, and it will burn itself out. The bubble will burst because it's unsustainable, because it is nonsense, basically.
Thank you, Marjorie. Our next speaker for the first question and final speaker for the first question is Wendy McDonald.
Hi, my name's Wendy and I'm standing for Kilmarnock North. The reason I joined Alba was for independence. That's basically it. And the reason I decided to stand as a candidate for independence is because I really needed a candidate here, and if there was nobody else that was going to do it, I was doing it. I first started out in 2014, going down to Kilmarnock Cross and annoying the Labour stall that used to come. Me, my sister, my daughter, we used to go down there every single Saturday and annoy the life out of them. And then after that, after they went away, the Yes Stairshire stall would come about. So we kind of hung about with them and started speaking to them. And then I was going to the marches and things and just always promoting independence. And then I get actually involved with All Under One Banner. That was organising all the marches all over Scotland, which is great. I still love it. I'm still doing the marches. But for me, looking about at my local area, I feel as if it's just been totally let go. This is a deprivation area I stay in Kilmarnock. We don't have much money here. I'm working 5 days a week and I'm still skint. I'm struggling, but just because I'm that couple of pounds below the above the poverty level, I get help with nothing. I look around and I see people are it's either heat or eat, and that is what it is. I've been through that myself when my kids were younger. I used to have to eat what they had left over in their plate. I would light candles and things to try and keep the house warm. I would only light fairy lights at Christmas and put no other lights on because I was afraid of the electricity bill. Talking about the fuel bill, Scotland's one of the leading exports in gas at the moment, yet we're all sitting freezing here. So my reason for why I joined Alba, I think I already said that, was for independence, and my reason for standing as a candidate is to make a difference to this area. The Scottish Government are promoting green areas and things like that, yet they're putting us a charge on us for emptying our brown bins. I'm going to see about doing away with that. I'm also going to see about making kids parks more accessible for kids. I mean, we've got a few parks around here and they are in a bit of a state. They're not really maintained very well. The council do come out and they do check the parks, but I would like for families of disabled people, when they go to the park, the kid isn't just stuck there in his chair or her chair watching. They can actually take part. And also the GRA, well, my issue with that is I was abused from a very young age, 5 till I was 14, and my worry is plain and simple, predators. That's a very small minority, but we don't know what a predator looks like, and that's what I worry about. Women not having that safe space. Blocks too, blocks get it as well. But for me, my priority is making sure kids and women are safe. We don't know what a predator looks like, as was said earlier on. Mine was a uncle, and I don't care about saying it either. We really need to look after our lassies, our women. That's it at the end of the day, and I'm going to do everything I can to do it.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Excellent. Everybody, excellent. Thank you so much for the answers to your first question. We're going to now go to Denise Finlay, who's going to say a few words. So Denise, over to you.
The words I want to say to you all, the candidates that are standing for election coming up, is thank you. And thank you from the bottom of my heart, honestly. You're brave and strong, and you're standing up for Scotland, and you're standing up for women, and you're standing up against poverty. And I'm so, so proud of you all. I'm so happy you're standing, and I cannot thank you enough. And everything that you've said, I don't really have to say much more, because you've all said it all. And just, we're going to win this. We are, because we deserve it. You deserve it. You really deserve it. And we're not going to let Nicola Sturgeon ruin any more Scottish people's lives. Scottish people's lives are not going to be ruined, and Scottish women's lives are not going to be ruined, and Scottish girls' lives are not going to be ruined. And you're the women to do it. You're going to stand up and stand up for Scotland, stand up for women, stand up against poverty. And thank you very, very much. And I don't think I need to say any more, because you've said it all. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Denise, for such a passionate thanks to everybody. And thank you to you also for the work that you've put in and getting all of these wonderful women to realise their worth and fight for it. Thank you. So it's over to the next question.
Yeah, it's actually just a little bit more about your ward. Do you know about any local issues of the environment, transport, travel, roads, housing, funding projects, poverty, and unpaid carers? Any issues in your ward that you have plans to tackle in particular, and plans obviously as an Alba councillor? And what assistance might you need as an Alba councillor in tackling those, alongside all the local people, of course, that you'll be working with?
I've told you I've got a hard word down here, you know, to get round, right? But in speaking to people in the area, right, particularly old people and young people, you know, like young mums, right? Young mums were saying things like, when I was telling them about the sex ed and, you know, what's proposed, they're going like that, you are kidding me on. Like, why didn't the teachers tell us anything about this? There's not been a meeting called, there's, you know, not been a thing about it, kind of thing. So yes, I will be concentrating on that with parents. The other thing is, I kind of feel that things like roads, transport, cleansing, all that, that's kind of bread and butter stuff. Every council has to deal with that. And yes, these things are important to council taxpayers, but in particular in my ward is I intend to concentrate is we have got a small hospital that was built at very great expense, right? And the next hospital up to us is like kind of Ayr, right? Or Crosshouse, right? And in our hospital, we have got space for chiropody, we have got space for a dentist, we've actually got an X-ray department, and we've got a suite that can do scans, right? Now, scans wouldn't just be for women who are pregnant, it would also be for people that have maybe got a problem with a gallbladder, right? Or they need a scan, you know, in another part of their body. And why should they have to travel 30 miles, you know, up to Ayr, right? Or even further up to Crosshouse when the facilities are here? And the problem is that we don't have the staff to come down to Girvan to do it. So one of the things that I would definitely be concentrating on is getting in touch with the community health councils kind of thing. That's like CHIPs, who are involved with social services and carers and everything else like that, and be saying, why can't we utilise these facilities in this practically brand new hospital and do them locally, instead of people having to use public transport, which is taking them like an hour, 2 hours at a time. And for example, anyone who needs to have a mammogram, right, or something done with their breast, or mental health facilities, has to travel all the way up to Irvine Royal, and that is 2.25 hours by public transport, right? If you're not lucky enough to have somebody who drives and can take you there. So that is definitely one of the things that, as a local councillor, that I would be negotiating with the appropriate agencies, to be saying to them, we have these facilities here. It's not as if you have to build them, right? What we need you to do is staff them. And it might only be, 2 days a week or 3 days a week, but we could certainly, use a wee where we could organise the appointments all on those appointed days, right? And save people when they're unwell or when they're worried about something, the journey, right? Plus the cost in public transport of that journey if they don't have access to a car or somebody that's willing to bring them, up there. So that's one of the things, that I would be doing for this area. Another one of the things that I think is really, really needed is there is no Citizens Advice Bureau between Stranraer right up to Ayr, and even if you can get an appointment, it's taking weeks and months, because not everybody is computer literate. Not everybody, has access to a computer. Councils are getting away with saying everything's got to be done online, and not everybody is competent or able to do that. And we used to have a kind of sub-office in Girvan that folk from Daly, right, and the other villages round about could come to in Girvan and see someone face to face. Now that office closed, at the time of COVID and lockdown, and it's still not open. And now that things are opening up again, it's time for that office to open up again. Because as I said, not everybody is able to access services through the internet, and they shouldn't have to. In fact, it's an arrogance on behalf of councils when someone phones up to say you can access through www. Because not everybody has the confidence to do that. So that's another thing that I would be, if chosen for the candidate here and got the seat, that's another thing that I would be hoping to bring about for this area.
Excellent. Thank you, Eileen. We'll now go back to Farah Hameed. I'll just put.
Okay, so the things that concern the people of Springboro, well, when I went about my little walkabouts and asked them what they needed, one of the things that concerned them, as Eileen was saying, was the community hubs and how they didn't have anything for the elderly and the families to get together, to sit down. What little they did have closed. So I think they had two things post-COVID, so we can't blame COVID. So it was post-COVID that opened up, and there was nothing for the teenagers either. So that's something I would look at. As for the Citizens Advice, there's a lot of funding that's been cut for the Citizens Advice, and they're being encouraged to go online. So one of the things that I would be looking to do is put in funding for things like advice services for people as well. So I would be looking to open up community hubs for my community. Also put investment for community hubs for the elderly, teens, education centres for them as well, for things for families, and communities, also work programs as well, in work cooperatives, to get people to do things, not be embarrassed. I think you see on social media, people are embarrassed. As I've been a carer myself for the last 2 to 3 years. Leanne was mentioning that she's a carer as well. People are embarrassed. If you're on benefits, you're embarrassed to the point on social media. So people are, if they're given work programs, but not necessarily to work, I think they should be given a choice, but empowered with work programs, community programs, education programs. There's so many derelict buildings all around Glasgow. So one of the things I would be looking to do is restore and bring the community together to how do I say it, to get them to have these work programs, have funding for these work programs in there. The other things we spoke about were shops were closed, banks were closed and all that. So people were relying on carers to take them to the city centre. Parks were closed as well. So there was no services for the elderly or the community as well. Rat infestation as well. So when they phoned up, I think one of the ladies had told me when she phoned up environmental health, she was told to hit the rat over the head with a shovel. I'm sure if it was somebody in the West End, they wouldn't be told to do that. I think it was just so specific areas in Glasgow would be dealt with separately to, say, Springboro. So I'd be looking to clean up Glasgow, especially my community as well. Also, there's a lack of motivation to vote because people just think all politicians are the same because policies haven't been followed through with the current government. I'm not going to say who they are. So I've been going around telling them that we have, their issues are my issues. We have with independence, we will carry through all the issues. We have our 5-point poverty plan. We have with one of the key issues that we're looking to do is join the economic, the European Union, which is the EFTA. We've been explaining to people how we would empower people with jobs. Unemployment's a big thing. If people don't have any motivation, you know, they don't have a job, they don't have anything to look forward to. Because they're constantly being told it's Westminster's fault, but actually, you know, it's our problem. We have to deal with it. It's Scot government. We have the resources, we have the oil, we have the gas, we have the money. We just need independence.
Excellent. Excellent, Farah. Thank you so much. Next up, back to Jackie again.
Thanks, Peter. I'd just like to echo what Farah and Eileen were saying about local services. At a time where local services are being cut, local community hubs are being closed down, you know, I totally agree. People are finding it harder to access what services there are. If the services themselves aren't being cut, they can't access them because local offices are being closed. In my ward, it's a huge geographic area and a lot of it's rural. There's 7 or 8 villages in my ward, and you know, there's a big farming community. So for me, transport is a really big priority. And not just about the affordability of transport, because you were hearing all about the Scottish Government giving under 21s and the youngsters free travel. And that's only any good if there's a bus that goes where you need it to go at the time you need it to go there. If you're a young person in Newborough, say, one of the towns in my ward, and you need to get into Cooper because that's where the most of your friends are, you know, to socialise with after school or the weekend, you know, you might have to come home at, you know, what you consider to be ridiculously early time. Things like that are affecting young people as well. So In terms of the farming communities, I'm also talking about EFTA with them, because, you know, a lot of them, yes, you know, there's quite a lot of Conservatives in the area, and the farming community and Liberal Democrats in my area, but these people still have to get their goods to the market. And, you know, if they're growing the vegetables or they're growing the crops and they can't get them to the market, or they're getting stuck at, you know, Brexit queues down south or whatever, we really need to be talking about the options for them as well. Poverty is maybe not such a big issue for people in that situation, but getting their goods to market is quite important for them, so they don't fall into that. And the women and children stuff cuts across everywhere. I'm sure we'll all talk about that tonight. Women, and it's just unbelievable, really, what the Scottish Government have done. I think the most of us on the call tonight are probably coming from a place where we thought Nicola Sturgeon was, you know, feminist to her fingertips, and all of this stuff that we were told that she was going to do for women and children. And it really is unbelievable what they've proposed. No one is suggesting that trans people shouldn't have services and shouldn't be listened to, but that can't come at the expense of women's safe spaces. And that's going to be an issue that, you know, is talked about everywhere. I'm already being told in my hairdresser in the ward, it's the topic of conversation in the hairdressers. My mum's telling me that women are talking about it in the bingo. She's off to the bingo, explaining everything to the older women that she is in touch with. And everyone who hears about it is just absolutely shocked. And I think that's what we need to do, is we need to get the word out there of the facts about the GRA proposals, because there's so much misinformation out there and people are just believing that there's going to be no impact. And there is going to be huge impact. We've already heard about girls missing school when they're on their period because they, you know, have mixed toilets and they can't be ensured privacy. And it's just awful that girls especially are having to go through this. And as a mother of boys, might I add, the boys are no happier with this situation than the girls are. I think that's really important in all of this. We talk a lot about the women and the girls, but the boys don't want to be changing in front of girls either. You know, aside from the safety aspects, they're young boys. They don't want to be embarrassed by being half dressed in front of the girls either. So that's the main issues for me in my ward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It's now back to Leanne.
I've been out leafleting for the past 6 days on the trot, out leafleting round doors and standing at school gates at 3 p.m. So I've had quite a lot of conversations with people in my constituency, in my ward. A lot of the issues are, some of the older people as well, is with COVID, is social isolation. They're on their own. They need help. They need help to be getting back out. They're scared to go back out. They don't know what they're doing. They sometimes complain of kids hanging about the streets as well. Alba's 0.5 on the poverty plan, giving kids free access to sports. That doesn't just help with obesity and health and everything. That helps with social isolation as well. Kids that come from poorer families, if they can't afford to be going to sports and to doing sports and being included in netball, football, anything like that, then they're socially isolated and they've nothing to do, and that's when they end up hanging about the streets. I think that's a very, very good idea, giving free sports to all under 18s, and it's something that I quite like. I have been explaining that to people on the streets as well. Social housing has came up quite a few times. One woman still has her son staying with her. He has been on the council waiting list for 4 years now. He's got a girlfriend and a wee boy, and they can't live together. They're still waiting on a house. They can't be together as a family. They're kept apart. Now, imagine, I've had 2 or 3 come in and saying the same thing, either not having a home or being inadequately housed. I don't know what the numbers are, but this is what I'm hearing from people in my ward. A few were mentioning roads, the state of the roads, which are pretty terrible, but obviously I think I'd like to tackle more poverty and that beforehand, before it. I've had quite a lot of issues, I think, because from people because I've been going round so much. A lot of them, they're coming from different perspectives as well. I had a walk about the more affluent area. My ward has a town centre, it has areas of high income, low income and middle income. It's a complete mix. So when I'm walking about the higher income areas, it's more to do with the state of the roads, and more things like that. Whereas if you go into the poorer housing schemes, it's the rising energy costs, the rising fuel costs. They don't know how they're going to cope, the social housing that they're in. I've seen some flats and the doors didn't fit properly, the windows didn't look great, they're old flats. How energy efficient are these houses, and what's being done maybe to help them with the rising costs? They're going to be paying more. I've said it before as well, that these people are on power cards, a tariff with a power card, they're paying more than someone that's well off for their energy. So various issues in my ward, which I'll have to look at in more detail and gather more information on.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Leanne. Laura, sorry, I skipped you there. My alphabetical order went out of sync a wee bit. But Laura, you'll be up next. My apologies, first of all. And whenever you're ready, Laura.
I think the main priority and the basic fundamental issue in the ward that I'm standing in is poverty. There's no escaping that fact, unless it's tackled head on and tackled head on quickly. I mean, we're sitting here, and I grew up here, and I'm not going to say how old I am because that would be unhelpful. But I remember these same areas having the same issues, the same concerns, and now 40 odd years later, nothing's changed. If anything, it's actually got worse. So the council have had 10 years. The SNP been in power for 10 years, and well, they've run the City Council, and things are progressively getting worse. I've checked all the stats that I could find, and it's a terrifying, heartbreaking picture when you look at Dundee. In terms of the mental health situation, it's got the highest rate of suicide in Scotland. I mean, 75% of those people that die, that take their own lives in Dundee, are men, usually young men. There's every other week, there's somebody on the Tay Bridge, some distressed poor soul that's threatening to jump, and the emergency services, they're closing the bridge. I mean, that's a regular occurrence, and people have, this sounds really heartless, but it's almost become a common theme that nobody even really blinks anymore because it's so bad. But in terms of, as I say, the poverty issues, until that's addressed, until people can heat their homes, feed their children, pay their bills, have some dignity, then there is no hope. And I think that's what's happened. Scottish people have lost hope. There's nothing there there's no positivity coming through at all because everything's so depressing, let's be honest. And a big part of that is the issue with drugs, the drugs issue. Dundee's got a terrible history on drugs, horrific. I think at one point it was the UK, the highest drug deaths in Europe. I mean, that's not a badge to be proud of. And obviously the Strathmartin ward that I'm standing for has got the largest population of children in it. So I think there's nearly 4,000 kids up to the 15-year-old mark that live in this area, and 22% of them live in poverty. So you could just imagine how bad the situation actually is, and is continuing to obviously become worse when you factor in the 2.9% council tax increase that Dundee City Council have decided to wallop everybody with, on top of the huge heating bills that are coming their way. I mean, this is now a crisis. It's an emergency. that this is tackled head on by the Scottish Government. These people need support.
Thank you, Laura. Marjorie, it's over to you next.
Well, we also have food banks here and there. I mean, it's kind of a mixture of quite well-off people in parts in there, and other parts that the same kind of ingrained poverty that you get in, you know, Inverness or anywhere else. So I would look forward to being able to, you know, hopefully get on some kind of committee or something in the council that would actually find out what could be done to make things better, and find out that, I mean, it's hugely difficult. I mean, I believe in universal basic income, that might be a good idea in the long term to really make a difference. I would also look to make sure that the Common Good Fund was used for the people of Nairn, and that this Sandown development, I think people want that to be kept as a green area. So I would look to maybe make sure about that as well. But just sort of, you know, speak for local people, find out what's important to them, and see if I can get in a position in the council where I can do something about it. Because that's the thing, if you don't get, if we don't actually get there, that's why I just put myself up, because I thought, well, if I don't, I might have nobody to vote for. So you can't change it if there's nobody there that's going to speak for you, kind of thing. So we'll have to put ourselves out there.
Thank you, Marjorie. Right, so next up, it's back to Wendy.
Okay. In my area, it's clear to see, first of all, that every area has got issues within the community and they're all needing resolved. And I've always been kind of active in my community. When the nursery that my daughter went to was always getting its windows smashed, so I'd done a petition, and we ended up, it was actually for shutters, but we ended up getting CCTV fitted to the outside of the school and the nursery. And then there was another thing I done, and I think it was in the paper too. It was a petition to get they had took away the lollipop man, where everybody crossed for the two schools, and I got the lollipop man put back and an extra lollipop man put in. There's the same issues here. Big issue is poverty, obviously, and is litter. I know I've got a bee in my bonnet, right, about these green bins, these brown bins, but they do my head in. We have terrible litter in these streets. Nobody can have a clear out in their houses anymore now. Either. That's why things are getting dumped. You get into the park and you've got a settee there with a flaming mattress. So a lot of it's litter and dog poo. I'm a dog owner. I've got 2 dogs, they're nutters. But if there's one thing it gets in my goat, it's at the parks where the kids are. There's people just letting their dogs poo and nothing's getting done about it. If you say to them about it, you get nothing but cheek back. I would actually give folk a ticket. That was supposed to be a wee while ago. So I would do away with the brown bin charge, and I would give folk a ticket for just allowing their dogs to continuously do the toilet in my parks. About the housing as well, with the other candidate that's standing for Kilmarnock North, he's got a bee in his bonnet about this, like it's rogue landlords. Not all landlords are rogues, but you have, like we were discussing the night and I just found this out, it's a safety electrical check, and that's a great thing, but now it's not that anymore. All they need to get is an electrical check, a wee tick box, not saying it's safe or anything like that. There's an area in where I stay, and you walk down the street and it's like bits of the front doorsteps are broken away. There's smashed bits and windies in the front door, put what do you call it? Sorry, plywood. So litter for me is a big thing, and just the pot. There's nothing for the kids to do. Round the back door for me, we've got a community centre. We also had a youth club. That youth club is shut down now. There's nothing happens there. You've got the weeds growing in between the area where you would walk to it. We have a community centre, and the people do great that run it. They have a thing for the old folk, the older folk, and they have wee clubs and that, but they're still not enough. We need things like that 7 days a week. And we need things for the kids. There's nothing for them to do. Remember when I met you, Peter, not that long ago, there was a couple of veins kicking about and flinging mud with the pipe and things, because there's nothing for them to do. They're bored, and when they're bored, it causes trouble. They get up to things that they're not meant to be up to. So we need to provide the support for the community here, for the old, for the young. We need to clean up our streets, make it look like a place you really want to live in, because I could open my front door and get to the bottom of my path and it's terrible the amount of litter. So also as a candidate, I'm going to, I know it's not about independence as a local councillor, but for me it is, because with independence, when you bring that, it shows the benefits it can bring to the local areas. So that for me is everything about the community.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Brilliant, everyone. Thank you so much for your answers to that second question.
Okay, folks, you've each said really a lot of interesting stuff about the Alba campaigning priorities: independence, equalities, poverty, women's rights, and you've spoken about how they're meaningful to you, and that's brilliant. As a councillor, have you got like even just a couple of ideas that you'd like to pursue? Because you've mentioned poverty. Have you got ideas that you'd like to pursue in how you think you could, or in your area, you could tackle poverty? Just a couple of good ideas, maybe.
Right, and we'll go back to Eileen first.
Okay, well, first of all, before I even thought about standing as a candidate for Alba, I have made myself known to a local hub. We do still have a hub, you know, in Girvan, right, where I wanted to offer my services as a voluntary welfare rights officer. That's for people to kind of come along and get a benefits check, make sure that they're actually getting the benefits that they should be getting, right? If there's anything else that they should be accessing, right? And that's for young and old. That's not just for young people, right? That's for the elderly as well. So that was one aspect of the things that I thought I might be able to help to alleviate poverty, right? And that was before I'd even joined Alba. So there's that aspect to it. Obviously as well, I want to see more like kind of welfare rights clinics, you know, because I said this is a huge area, right, with nothing. We don't have, what do you call them, the Citizens Advice Bureau, right, who would advise people on that. So that's something else that I feel quite passionately about, that people should be able to access that, and access that on a face-to-face level, right? Not through an appointment on the telephone, not through applying online, but speaking to somebody face-to-face so they can tell you, listen, this is my problem, I don't have enough money, is there anything else that I can access, right? And for example, what a lot of people don't know about is particularly folk that are maybe living in private rented accommodation, is there's something called the discretionary top-up fund. So they're short of money, and every local authority gets access to that fund. They keep it kind of quiet, the local authority, right? They do keep that one quiet. But however, if their hours are short, you know, at work, if somebody's on a 0 hours contract kind of thing and they're not bringing in enough money, you know, to help pay the rent, it would be able to help them access this discretionary top-up fund, right, that is given to each local authority, and folk can access it in order to help with rent. There's also things like people can get access to vouchers, you know, from the local authority that they're able to spend in some of the supermarkets, and they can also get help with gas and electricity, you know, a voucher to top up that. But the thing is, folk don't know about it. They don't know about it unless somebody tells them about it. So that's something that, you know, I was hoping to do before I even thought about joining Alba or anything like that. And I think it's something that's quite important that not just myself, but I think maybe all of us women candidates should be thinking about it and trying to access that in our areas. Because let me tell you, ladies, every local authority has got an amount of money allocated to them by central government, and it's called the discretionary fund. And that discretionary fund even helps if somebody's got to move house. It can pay for, because it can be like 400 quid, you know, just to hire a van, you know, so that you can move house, because people that are living in, because there isn't sufficient public sector housing anywhere, right? Maggie Thatcher made sure of that when she wouldn't let us spend the capital receipts on building more council housing, right? Right. And what's happened is that the private sector has had to take up the slack on it, right? And there still isn't enough housing, right? But private sector rents are funded through, the rent is set by something called the local housing allowance, and it's meant to be independent, but it isn't independent at all. And the rents are higher in private sector housing than they are in public sector housing, right? So if you kind of lose your job, if you go on short hours, there is a fund there available, which nobody tells you about, right? And I would hope that all the ladies on here get to find out about this discretionary top-up fund, which is in each local authority area throughout Scotland. And the money doesn't come from Scottish Government, it comes from central government, it comes from Westminster, right? And the government that we have just now in charge in Edinburgh hasn't told anybody about it, but I know about it, right? And if anybody wants to contact me by direct message, you know, after this, I will tell them how to access it for people in their area.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eileen. We now move back on to Farah.
So what would I do? Well, poverty is a key thing. So I would definitely feed the children of Scotland, and our 5-point poverty plan is one of the things which would give our children a key start. What I would like is what other third world countries do is they have vitamin programs for all their children. So each household have they give vitamins and things, and you know what? People from here go abroad and they have charities from here going abroad and giving vitamins to people in the third world, which is good. Charity is good. Charities are very good for doing that. But why do children here suffer? Why do children here, households here, don't have vitamins? Our Scottish children are undernourished. That's a question we need to ask. Also, one of the things that I noticed when I was a working mum is that childcare facilities are really, really bad. So I had to pay £25–30 per child. I've got 2 teenage children, so they're past that age. And I was paying through the nose. And as Wendy said, you're basically eating the scraps, maybe having a cup of soup. You're eating the leftovers of your child. The cost of living is going up. So we should take a book out the Scandinavian countries that give free childcare for working parents, working single mothers. These are kind of programs that an independent Scotland should adopt, as well as having, you know, the discretionary payments as well as top up. Those are good as well, that everybody should have. So we should look at having paid childcare from our government for single mothers and parents who are struggling, so that we can have a workforce that is happy, that can go to work happy knowing that their children are safe. You know, those are things. As for the education policies, now where would I start? Well, definitely I would have the parents engaged in the education policies, not exclude parents. You know, being a former teacher myself, a high school teacher. So that's definitely a start. and housing. Now, you'd have the children of Scotland fed, you would have the children of Scotland in a nice home. So make sure everybody's in a nice home, you know. So if they're fed and everybody's in a nice home, people are going to sleep on time, children are going to sleep on time, parents are happy, children are happy. You're going to have educated children, you're going to have happy parents, you're going to have a very good economic structure in place. People are going to work. You know, look at how other countries do it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Farah. Thank you so much. If you're not finished, carry on.
No, I was just thinking about how we have working cooperatives as well in the third world countries, which are considered backward. Now, we fought very hard for period poverty, where the schools have period pads, and suddenly we're going backwards with the GRA reforms.
Mm-hmm.
And our girls are being picked on with these gender neutral toilets, and they'll no longer be able to, you know, they may have had this period poverty where they're getting the free sanitary towels, sanitary napkins, but they can't access the toilets because they're embarrassed to use the toilets. And I have a teenage boy as well, and he'd be scared to go into gender neutral toilets.
Mm-hmm.
As Jackie had said, she's got boys too.
Yep. Thank you so much, Farah. Right, we're moving on in the right order this time. So it's going to be Jackie next.
Okay, thanks. One thing that I think for my ward, and it's really a big area, rural villages mostly, is actually getting the word out there to people about what's already available to them. There's a lot of stuff out there. Eileen's talking about the discretionary funds the government has, lots of other things, services as well provided by charities, third group organisations, and we need to let people know what's already there. But we need to do it in a way that's not just posting on the internet, because if people, if they're in a rural area, they might not have a stable internet connection anyway, even if they can afford to have the internet connection. And I know that the treasurer in our branch in our Laku in Alba lives in a bit of a rural area. It's only 3 or 4 miles outside town, but there's no cable. So sometimes you're having meetings and it drops off. And that leads to issues for people. How do they have interviews if they are trying to get into work or college and they need to go online, because so much is online these days. So I think it's really important to make sure people have the technology they need and the access to it. And I think back to some of us who are old enough will remember mobile library vans, and where the van used to come round. I was very lucky that I had the experience of working on it when I was 17 and a YTS trainee. And I think there's still a place for that kind of provision in areas where people just can't get, it's maybe not a mile down the road to the nearest local service office like it might be in an urban area. So that's quite important, that people can access the services. We used to have a housebound book service as well, which I thought was great. And it used to go once a week or once every 2 weeks to people who were housebound. And not only did it give them access to the library books, but it gave them somebody to talk to once in a while when you turned up to deliver their books. They might maybe not see anyone else in between times. So the social aspects of it, poverty and rurality in that sense, are really important to me. Housing is a huge issue where I'm standing. It's a tourist area. It's near St Andrews, and a lot of the houses are owned by people who use them for holidays or who travel. I met one person last week who lives in half her time in England and half here, works at 9 Mills Hospital. And so, it's just out of most folks' grasp in this area to be owning houses. And there's no social housing, I'm not saying none, but very little being built. So people are living in poor housing stock, remote areas with bad access to services. So I think we really need to look at the whole issue of land tax. I know it's been discussed, and Alba is
talking about it, and we're going to have an assembly, I believe, about it. But I think that's really important, and I like the idea of the land tax, whereby the landlords are made to be responsible to come forward and pay, and after a year the land's taken off them if they don't pay. And I think we could make a lot of use of a scheme like that for building social housing, and we can link it in to apprenticeships, so young people get the opportunity to work on, you know, learn their trade, builders, joiners, plumbers, whatever, and build the houses of the future, you know. And it does give them a little bit of hope and a bit of motivation if you're building a house that, you know, one day you might live in, you know. It's quite powerful, I think, and links into some of the older building stuff Farah mentioned earlier as well. I know that's another idea that's floating around, you know, restoring some of our old buildings, you know, culturally important buildings that have been left to rack and ruin. So kind of tackles two birds with one stone. But the housing thing is really a big issue for me, and I think we need much more work around social housing and what suits people, because at the moment it's really not good enough what the Scottish Government are doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you. So next up is Laura.
I think one of the ways that we need to help people help themselves get out of poverty. I think that that kind of support, especially, I think Jackie and Farah have already mentioned that apprenticeships. I think apprenticeships are extremely important, not just for young people, for adults as well. And I think that there's not enough emphasis or focus being put on providing these kind of training jobs, vocational training, but ones that are actually decently paid, so people can still afford to pay their bills, have a little treat now and again, but actually gain qualifications whilst working. So I think we've lost a bit of focus on that over the years, and I think it's something that really needs to be brought back in and thought much more about. I think also I don't think the councils really make enough of the local businesses. I think there should be some initiatives, far more initiatives set up for local businesses to try and help get some of the poorest people back into working, or at least learning some skills. I mean, I think there should be more of a focus on working groups and trying some sort of thinking outside the box, I think would be quite useful sometimes. And I think some more life skills. I think people need to be taught life skills, just basic life skills, like how to cook, how to live on a budget, how to eat healthily, how to make sure your kids eat healthily. When the price of a pizza is cheaper than a bag of apples, there's something wrong with a country that allows that to happen. So healthy eating, focus on mental well-being as well. I mean, there's just so much. The list would never end. But I do think that one of the main ways out of poverty is by giving people well-paid jobs, training them up, letting them fend for themselves, letting them become entrepreneurs, let them use their imagination. There's no limits to what somebody can achieve if someone gives them a chance to actually do it. So I think that's really, really important.
Thank you, Laura. Right, next person.
I think poverty from a local authority point of view is never going to be fixed. But we can do some things, I think, to mitigate it a little. Dunfermline's got a lot of community groups. Quite a few of them sprung up during COVID, to be honest, and they're still running. They're using Fair Share for the food. They've contacted supermarkets in the area, and they're reducing food waste. I'm not ashamed to say that I've been there. I'll go up with my pound coin and my carrier bag, and I'll get a bag full of messages that's just getting to date or perfectly good food. Take it down. So I would encourage people to use these. They also do clothing banks. It's sad that it's come to this, that people are having to do this, and this isn't just people on benefits. This is working people going out and having to use these facilities. Community gardens, they're springing up, so give them some land, grow some vegetables. It's a life skill as well. It's not a bad thing. Someone mentioned like helping people into education, and the high dropout is unfortunately the single parents with kids. They just can't do it. There isn't effective childcare for them, or or there isn't enough money for them to support them to do this. So they just can't get out, and the dropout rate was very, very high. I'd also look at, I mentioned earlier about energy efficiency. Some of the poorest people are in some of the least energy efficient housing. Shouldn't that be looked at? Shouldn't that be mitigated in some way? If your energy efficiency is lower, then give these people some help, because they're really going to struggle. I think Alba as well, their policy of doubling, I think they were doubling the EMA. That's all well and good as well, but EMA, I've got a niece, and it requires, she gets EMA and it requires 100% attendance. Now, if these kids are coming from difficult homes, I'll say difficult, I won't say anything else, or chaotic households, then 100% attendance is sometimes completely unachievable, and then they don't get their EMA payment. Absolutely ridiculous. This doubling of the EMA payment will certainly help some of these younger kids, 16 and 17-year-olds, to get out. So I'd be pushing to see something like that to see that being implemented, to help these kids and to get them an education and get out of the situation that they're in. I would also be reducing their attendance rate for that. If their attendance drops, instead of penalising them for it, why not ask them why and support them to get back in, or to support them to get extra. So there's a few things that can be done, I suppose, at a local level, but you're never going to fix poverty at a local level. You're never even going to fix it at the UK level, because we're absolutely governed by Tories and they don't care. So it's going to require full independence as soon as possible to even start looking at tackling poverty. Poverty's been here, as I say, I seen it there 40 years ago, and it's what's changed. What's changed? We need to be on our own, and we need to be a socialist country that looks after our poor people. You bring your poor people up, then we're going to have a much better Scotland, much better economy. You're going to have people contributing. You're going to have less sickness, less mental health issues. Yeah, you fix poverty, you fix a whole load of problems, but it has to be at a national level, and we can only do that with our independence.
Thank you so much, Leanne. We move back on to Marjorie.
Okay, but all those sound like good ideas. I would also tip everyone off, if somebody loses their spouse before pension age, the Department of Work and Pensions are actually give you a lump sum and then continue giving you payments for about a year into your bank account. But they're supposed to let you know, but the funeral director told me in his experience they don't get in touch with you. So if you know anybody in that situation, give them a tip off that they should go and get that sorted out, because it can help, at the time. I like the idea of the vitamins as well, especially vitamin D, because of course in Scotland we don't have the sunshine. And I always remember when I was a child in Dingwall, there was a woman whose legs went out like that, and my mum telling me she would have had rickets as a child, and that's why we got free milk in school, to make sure that we didn't end up like that. So, and I know that in certain parts of the UK, things like rickets and what's the other one, scurvy, have been making a comeback in certain areas. So I think that vitamins is definitely a good idea. Apart from that, but I agree with what Leanne just said. It's going to have to take big changes, like putting in universal basic income or something like that just changes society. There's a book called The Spirit Level, which is written by two people who studied societies all over the world, and they worked out, they did it for years and did all this research, and they worked out that the more equal a society is, the better it is with health, mental health and physical health, and suicide rates, and just about everything. Societies that were more equal were happier and healthier and better. And it didn't actually matter how they became more equal. It wasn't how they did it. It was just the fact that they managed to get there, and everything was better, not just for people who were poor, for almost everybody, except with like maybe Liz Windsor or somebody might be in the same position, but almost everybody else was better off because they weren't looking at everybody else and feeling that they were like here and somebody else was there, or they were there, and it just, everybody was psychologically in every way better. So it's tackling how to actually, you know, get rid of this extreme inequalities and the celebration of an extreme inequality, like your House of Lords, your monarchy. And you know, we're not going to be able to do that. And if we got independence, we would have got rid of the House of Lords overnight. Westminster voted in 1910 to make the House of Lords an elected chamber, and it's, you know, like 110 years later, and it still hasn't happened. So, but if nobody would have brought in an unelected second chamber in independent Scotland, it just wouldn't even be suggested, because people wouldn't even consider it. That just wouldn't happen. So we would have been able to get rid of that millstone round our necks of the House of Lords. We would have got rid of it overnight if we'd voted yes. And that just changes everything. And I mean, how long would the monarchy last? Not very long, especially when, you know, the inevitable is going to happen. It's not going to happen in independent Scotland. So that changes your whole psyche of your society. It changes everything, that kind of thing. But I know you can't do that by becoming a councillor at Highland Council, but you can still try and keep it. And
it's where you start, isn't it, though, Marjorie? That's the thing.
Yeah, and nothing's impossible. When change happens, it can happen very quickly. So that's my attitude. So you go for what you really want and just say, yeah, we can do it.
Absolutely, Marjorie. Thank you so much. Wendy, I believe it.
As your local councillor, I'll be doing something that's been unheard of the past few years. I'll actually be available. I'll be there if you need me. I'll also feed back to you. You won't have to hunt me down. I'll get back to you if you come to me with a problem. Also, just making sure that you know the services that are available, that was explained earlier on, all the benefits, all the help you can get. And just show how we can make it better for our community if we all can work together and try and get things done. But Jackie was saying earlier about the library van. I remember that library van came about, and where I stay, I have got a couple of sheltered housing areas for the older folk, and there's one that's a wee bit higher care. But I remember them used to always go out to the library and get a wee book or something like that. And also the fella would come to your door, like she had said, Jackie had said earlier on, they would come to your door if you couldn't make it out of it. So I would be more accessible for the people in my ward, and I'd make sure I get the job done and have all the benefits at hand.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I love that. Direct, brilliant. So tell us of what you think of the issues and impact of self-ID, GRA and the hate crime legislation might be on individuals and families in your ward. For example, what impact might there be on women's safe spaces, services for vulnerable women and children, on teachers and head teachers, on mental health services and other services in your ward? What might you be able to do to support parents coming to you with their concerns? And in a couple of sentences thereafter, just sum up why you as an Alba councillor, with your experience and background and commitment to your ward, should be #1 choice as the local councillor on the 5th of May. So first of all, we're going to come back to Eileen.
Right. First of all, I'm going to mention a demographic that nobody's mentioned here. Right. We've all gone on about parents, families, children, poverty, everything else like that. And what we have forgotten to mention is the 50% of women in this country who are single, right? They're not married, you know, or maybe they have been married and they're divorced, right? And they are on their own. and they don't have, you know, like family members who are going to stand up for them. Like, for example, if they had to go to hospital, right, and were really quite badly injured, and all of a sudden somebody turns up to do personal care for them, and it's not a woman, it's not a female that's doing personal care for them, right? It's someone who is a trans woman, right? And how on earth are they going to be able to turn around and say, no, I'm sorry, I don't want that, without the hate crime law kicking in, right? And I'm lying there sick in their hospital bed, and the next thing, 2 police are coming to put a pair of handcuffs around them and chain them to the bed because they've had the temerity to say, no, sorry, I don't want that, right? Who's going to speak up for them? And as far as this country is concerned as well, and this is a bugbear for me as well, as much as I'm, you know, I was a mother of 10 children, right? I've got 8 grandchildren. Who's going to speak for the single women in this country who has nobody to stand up for them, right? Who is going to be saying when they're going to hospital? And for women in prison, right, who've got nobody to speak up for them, right? Who is going to help them? We as women and we as candidates, you know, for Alba, it's our job to be speaking up for these women, right? It's bad enough that we've got the hate crime bill, which was set up first in order to silence us, because women are the first. We are the first. We are, right, the vanguard, right? We are there, right? We are the ones who protect the kids and everybody else. That's our job. That's what we do. And they brought in the hate crime law, so we can no longer say no to it, right? And as Alba women, right, and Alba candidates, we should be turning around and going like that. No, right? We're not having this. And we're going to stand up, not just for, you know, the mums and the dads and the parents and everybody else, but we're going to be speaking up for the single women. The ones that are on £73 a week universal credit and can't get off it. The ones that get hounded by the Department of Works and Pensions and getting told, what are you doing to get a job? But there are no jobs for them when they've reached the age of 52 or 53 or 54. And yes, it is ageism, and we know about it, but it's a fact. So who's going to speak up for them? Who's going to represent them? And who's going to protect them? And I think as an Alba councillor, right, if I'm chosen, right, they're amongst the people that I would be standing up for and sticking up for and turning around to Scottish Government and everybody else and going like that, excuse me, but in the politest possible terms, you can ram that.
Brilliant, Eileen, brilliant. Right, got my alphabetical list back up, so it's back to Farah with a very interesting sign also that she's going to display at some point through this. Free milk, free vitamins, free hot meals, 0 to 18 years. And then it says hashtag Alba and the ref too.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, we used to get milk, and then it stopped when you reached high school. Do you guys remember that? I'm so old.
Aye, well, I remember it. I remember it. No, you're not that old.
Wendy's laughing. I'm older than Wendy. Okay, so how does the self-ID, GRA, hate crime legislation affect me? How does it affect my constituents? How does it affect the people I spoke to on my wee walkabouts? Well, I'm going to tell you something. I was a survivor of forced marriage, my first marriage. Right, so, and I know quite a few people, and probably some people will tell me to hush, and I'm not supposed to speak out about this. And I probably, I know Glasgow welcomes a lot of refugees, women and girls who have been going through FGM, female genital mutilation. Okay, so this self-ID will affect them. Women of all ethnic minorities, white, black, Chinese, you name it, cross-culturally, have been through rape, domestic violence. So taking away our single-sex safe spaces, it affects us. So as a child, I went through emotional, physical and sexual abuse as well. So self-ID, so this will probably all come out when I'm doing the councillor campaign. So I might as well just tell everybody now. I got permission from my children. So I'm going to give, I'm telling everybody now. So I would, and I put this on Facebook, I would not use Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre while that person is there. So I know a lot of people have been picked up for voicing their opinions out loud, but that person who is self-IDing themselves as a woman, to me, so I think for equality's purposes, people who self-ID should have separate services for themselves, but they should not encroach on women-only services. I have been in a women's refuge with my children. I would not be comfortable if I had to use a women's refuge again. I would not be comfortable with a person who self-ID'd or somebody who was trans. I'm just putting it out there. But for equality's purposes, I would be happy if they had their own services. And Scottish Government have the money to do that. All that money they've spent doing this survey, that survey, with their own ministers. They haven't put it out to the general public, because I've spoken to the general public. I've spoken to all the charities. I've spoken to Muslim charities. I've spoken to people at the mosques. I've spoken to the men at the mosques, because they're scared to speak out loud because of the hate crime legislation in case they get picked up. You know, I've spoken to people from different ethnic minority groups, but they're scared to speak out loud in case the Scottish Government sends police out to them to put, in case they get picked up. That they're not happy with this. But these are the fathers, these are the grandfathers. They're not happy with this legislation. They don't want their daughters, their granddaughters, their wives, their mothers sharing spaces with men who self-ID, or any other men for that matter. So I'm just putting the message out there for @ScotGov. It's a no from my constituents, who I will be serving if I'm elected.
Thank you, Farah. Laura, back to you.
It's a very emotional subject. I mean, women and men all over Scotland are extremely distressed, I think, at some of the way this looks like it's going. I think sometimes you have to separate the emotional from the actual reality of what's actually happening at the moment. And it's very difficult to do that. Unfortunately, it looks like self-ID has already infiltrated every level of Scottish society. So sometimes it's a case of thinking, right, okay, while we were maybe distracted with other things, they've managed to infiltrate and sneak all this through, and they've woven it through every public service, every business, every infrastructure level of local government and national government. So the damage, to be fair, even though I hate to admit it, has already been done. So I think now women have to continue to stand up, and men and anybody else that wants to join this, and actually pushing to have the Equality Act strengthened, to have the actual Equality Act adhered to. Legal exclusions still apply. It's not illegal to exclude trans people from services. It's in there, it's perfectly legal to do it. And I think that the virtue signalling and the screaming transphobia and bigot at people is basically just a smokescreen to get me to be quiet and to stop us pushing for the right to actually legally enforce these exclusionary protected characteristics. Women, sex is a protected characteristic. We have rights, women have rights. No woman that's been abused as a child, raped, assaulted, mentally tortured by a man should have to sit in a rape centre, a women's refuge, and sit there with a man who now professes to the world that he's a female. And I'm not being anti-trans, because trans women can also be put at risk by predatory males. So it's in everybody's best interest to resolve this, but we need to start fighting legally, if necessarily, to get the actual Equality Act enforced. And I think that's our only actual hope now, because it's too late. Self-ID is already here. The GRA reform bill is just a rubber stamp for Nicola and her ideologues crusade. So we're going to have to look at it a different way and fight them from the other side now. And fight them, we'll have to. Thank you.
Right, Jackie, on you go, pal.
Okay, I want to pick up on what Laura was saying there about existing legislation, the Equalities Act, and I completely agree that that is what we have at the moment as the basis for what we're working from. The GRA is proposed, it will likely get through in some form of watered down form, but it really isn't good enough. It really isn't. And girls and women will opt out of using services because they won't feel safe when they go there, that they know that they're going to be dealt with by a woman. We all have, experiences or friends or personal experience of being on the other end of some of these men, and it's not all men. I really thank you to all of them. And as a councillor, if I'm lucky enough to be elected and people want me to represent them, I will represent all of them, whether they're men, women, boys, girls, or, Conservatives, Liberal, Democrats. Everyone's issues matter. And when it comes to issues like this, the GRA, these cut across, this is issues that affect all political persuasions and none. And what Women Won't Leashed are doing is great work, and we fully support them as well. I know they're non-political, but we need to come together. All women of all parties need to come together on this, because it really isn't good enough. And whatever the other issues are, this has to be the priority going into this election for people, and it certainly is for me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Right, I believe we're back to Leanne this time and getting back in some sort of order.
GRA reform affects everything. It affects everything to do with our lives. It affects prisons, it affects changing areas, toilets, sports, women's refugees, hospital care. I wouldn't like my mum being in there with men. Social care. We all know how many predators and that go into the social care sort of sector and that as well. I've seen too much of it happen. Places on women-only boards, rape crisis centres, like Farah was saying. Even children's and primary schools. I've seen some of the literature that they were sending out, and keeping secrets from parents, or just not telling them the truth. How can a person in authority, I feel for the teachers and the head teachers in this case, how can a person in authority let a kid know that it's okay to keep things from their parents? That's a huge red flag, massive red flag. You're also putting kids, I listened to a talk from, I think it was Shireen Benjamin through the week there at Cooper, and she was saying that 80% of kids that express gender dysphoria will grow out of it. It's something they call watchful waiting, and if they wait, 80% of them will be, it'll turn out that they're either gay or lesbian, and we're sending these kids, we're putting them on drugs that's going to change them for life, their bone density, their heart, and there's no way back from that. It's not just you can't just call them puberty blockers and reversal. No, that they're left with long-term health problems, and people are advocating for this. I don't get it. I absolutely don't get it. And as I say, there's no debate. You're stifled down. I wouldn't be saying all this. I wouldn't be saying all what I'm saying if I was in a job where I would get the sack, because I probably would get the sack, or looking for promotion or anything else. We've been told that we can't speak about it. People even get arrested for it, So there's many issues to do with GRA reform and the effect that it's having on women's rights and the effect that it's having on schools. In the schools as well, I've heard from teachers and head teachers, and none of them are trained in how to deal with this. It doesn't bear thinking about, to be honest. I'll just round things up because I know we've chatted for ages, and I want to be an Alba councillor. I want to help people. I'm good at advocating for people. I'm a logical thinker. I can work with a budget. I can see what priorities there should be. I can see where we should be taking money from and putting money to. I'm quite proud of a few of Alba's policies, that the £500 payment. I'd be pushing for that as well. £500 to people that are on the maximum council tax reduction. These are the poorest people about, and £500 towards their water charges, which is also increasing this year. It would be an absolute benefit to them. I think Alba's the only party that's going to that's immediately wanting independence, and that is why I am standing as an Alba.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Thank back to Marjorie.
Okay, well, what I would say to parents and teachers and everybody really is that the whole GRA reform and also the hate crime bill, they're going to be subject to more legal challenges, because we've had a win recently, and that's, as Joanna Cherry said, it's got implications for all of these other things. The census one didn't affect individual rights, but the gender recognition on public boards did, and it brought in the Equality Act 2010. And Lady Dorian's judgment was that the Scottish Government doesn't have legislative competence to edit and alter the protected characteristics. And that's what they're doing in the hate crime bill, and that's what they're doing in GRA reform. So I don't see there's any possible way that that won't have, almost as if it goes through, it's going to have legal challenges almost immediately. So in a way, perhaps this is actually the turning point and where it's all going to start changing, because as has been said, self-ID has come in through the back door, because they've had this societal terrorizing campaign where everybody has to accept it, or people going to transphobia. So people have been too frightened, and they've been actually threatened. Their jobs have been threatened. They're, they've been physically threatened. There's been horrible pylons and, social, pressure. So that it's been accepted through that. But I think the change is coming, and also, especially as regards children, we've got Sweden, Finland, France, and the UK have all recently done a huge reverse ferret on children who identify as trans getting medical intervention. Sweden has ceased it. They have said no, they're stopping it. And that is the first thing that's going to happen. And then people are going to also understand that social transition is also irreversible. I read a really good article about that as well. You can't get your childhood back. If you've been told through your childhood a big fat lie that you can turn into something that you can't turn into, you can't get that messed up, what that does to your head back. So that is child abuse as well, not just medical intervention. And this, the world is going to wake up to this, because it is unsustainable. That is my position, that it's like believing that the earth is flat. It's believing some mad religious cult. It will die out, because it has to. So that's what I would always try to be positive with people, and just say, we are fighting this. We'll fight it in the courts, and we will win, because we have to win. And I would also, as regards voting for me, if you're in Nairn, if you agree with what I'm saying, and I would say that I'm endorsed by Liz MacDonald, who was a Highland councillor for Nairn. She was the longest serving SNP Highland councillor before she left SNP, and she is backing me for this election. So cheers.
Thank you very much, Marjorie. And last but by no means least, we're back to Wendy.
Cool. First of all, to say to Farah, it's just the makeup that doesn't make me look old. I'm old enough to remember the milk in the schools, and also we took our brew card into the community centre and we got our free cheese, and I think, did we get butter and all? So I'm old enough to remember that. But this, the hate crime bill, that's how it really sticks in my throat, that you're losing your freedom of speech. So yeah. We first came across that when the guys down at the border were called terrorists, when the border should have been shut in the first place. They were just saying, go home, we don't want COVID up here. That was it. So that was used against them. But now if you speak out against everything, anything, particularly the GRA, is flung right at you. What I worry about with that is not only the minority predators that slip through, but also, see, when I was younger, I was a pure tomboy. I wanted to be a boy. I hung about with the boys. I couldn't be bothered with lassies. What if I started taking the drugs and then suddenly I realised, hold on, I was just a tomboy. There's a lot of people that's killed themselves because of this, and it's really, really frightening. So for me, I would like to protect our freedom of speech and expression, whilst also protecting our women and our young, our wains. Vote for me at Alba. We're the only party that cares for the community. We want to look after the young and the old. As I say, I'll be there for you. You can come have your own opinion. I believe in freedom of expression and freedom of speech. You can say whatever you want to me, just don't ever call me a Tory.
Brilliant, Wendy, brilliant. What a way to finish. Now we're going to come back, Denise.
Okay. So yeah, thanks for all that. It was so good, and obviously like really, really talented people, and also people that speak out, because that's what we wanted. We didn't want people that were just in it, you know, for a career, or they were not passionate, not committed, just there because that was seen as a step on their career. So we wanted people that would really speak out and stand up, and that's what we have with you women candidates who are fantastic. But on the women's rights part and what you can do, because of the way the council elections are, most councils are quite hung, you know, so even if a few of you get elected in each council, you'll be able to make a huge difference, because your votes may well be the swing votes that they need. And so there's a few things that you can do. So for example, the stuff about, you know, affirming trans children and keeping secrets from the parents, that is guidance, it's not law. So as a council, you can just dismiss that guidance, and you can instead use guidance from Sex Matters or Transgender Trend. The school sex survey, the health and wellbeing census, that is a council decides whether to send that out. So you can say no. You do planning, so you can ensure there's always single sex toilets and always single sex changing rooms in any schools. So there'll be more than just that. I'm sure you'll be able to manage things like single, you know, making sure that they're segregated for sports in schools, things. So there's a lot you can do as councillors. And because in general, the Scotland doesn't agree with what the SNP are doing, and the SNP councillors are not like you, they're there to do as they're told by Nicola Sturgeon. They'll need an out. They won't believe in it. They don't believe in it any more than anyone else in Scotland, but they're doing it for their careers. So when you say, well, we're not voting with you unless you make sure we have single sex toilets, they can just then use you as an excuse. And they can say to Sturgeon, oh, well, you know, we had to do it, Alba made us do it. So that would really be our plan. And the Equality Act exceptions for single sex spaces, that's law. So you can use that law to bypass anything Sturgeon and our gender fanatics, Harvey and so on in Holyrood tell you. So the fight can be won in the council chambers. And I think you are some of the women and the men that will be standing for Alba that are going to take that fight into the council chambers, and I'm sure you're going to win. And from my point of view, I do everything I can to help you and support you, and hope to see you as councillors come May.
There was one woman that I waited to the end, and I'm glad that I did. This is obviously a celebration of Women's History Month and International Women's Day in particular. And it's the magnificent 7 women here. Maya Angelou fits perfectly. You don't always remember what somebody done to you or what somebody said to you, but you remember how they made you feel. And tonight I'm proud to be Scottish and to have you women standing along with others and other men, but particularly having you women standing and pushing for what you're pushing for. And I thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. So thanks so much. Thank you to all Alba human female candidates. You're standing in your own particular wards, and if Tweet Street can do anything to assist you, obviously along with the Alba party itself, we'll be more than happy to do so. I'd like to give a special thanks to Lita for organising this event this evening. Lita, thank you so much. I know you don't like your face on the camera, but you need to take the praise when it's coming. It's been an honour to host such an amazing event, and I wish all Alba candidates good luck on your run to the council chambers. On a personal note, I would like to thank all you wonderful women for participating in celebrating International Women's Day. It's goodbye for Cinnamon Bridges, Tweet Street Scotland occupied, the satirical saltire. And remember, your first vote goes to Alba on the 1st of May, regardless of what ward you're in. Thank you and good night.